Well, you hear a lot about people making comebacks in show business, and well, this isn't one of the comeback stories. This is more like being a survivor. Hi, everyone. We're at the Trump Taj Mahal. That's a first. Never been here before. My guest is Shecky Greene, who's going to talk about surviving when we come back right after this.
I'm surviving just going through the casino because I've never been here before either.
And we're back at the Xanadu Theater at the Trump Taj Mahal. And my guest is a gentleman who hasn't written, he hasn't called in 6 years. Shecky Greene, welcome back to Atlantic City.
Thank you, David. It's a pleasure to be here.
Good to see you.
Financial pleasure to be here.
I'm sure it is. And a mental pleasure.
Yeah, truthfully.
A financial and a mental pleasure.
I really didn't think I'd ever come to the point that I'd be here again. Any place in the working.
You were out of the business for 6 years.
Yeah, and I really should have been out of the business before that, because I really, I guess some people would call it a burnout, but I think it was really a very clinical state of depression. Mm-hmm. And I felt it happening to me more and more on stage, and I just couldn't handle it anymore. Just finally took over, and I said, that's it, I got to get out.
You got to the point where you had difficulty facing an audience, didn't you?
I couldn't face an audience. I was in Vancouver, British Columbia, and there was about 3,000 people. And I walked out, and nothing would come out of my throat. I just turned to my piano player, I turned to Herbie, and I said, well, do a song. And then I went into a song, and I couldn't do that either. And I says, I got my composure, and I says, I've always wondered when I was going to retire from this business. And I says, it's right now, and I walked. And those people are still sitting. That's six years ago.
They're still sitting in the theater waiting for you to come back.
He'll come back. Don't worry, Harry. I know this guy does funny things.
All right, so
then you give $1 to your uncle. Then you give $1 to your wife. See, they just told me the Jackie Mason routine.
We'll do that on the anniversary show. Well, with you though, things got worse and worse and degenerated to the point where you became almost. Well, you were agoraphobic.
I was definitely. I couldn't drive a car. I got crazy with driving an automobile. I couldn't. Certain rooms where we'd go to eat, my wife and I couldn't handle them. Noise, people. It was just a total. I guess psychiatrists don't like to call it a breakdown, but I guess it really was a breakdown. But it really is genetically in my family. My mother had the same thing. My aunt had the same thing. My uncle had the same thing, and my father's side was not too stable either.
Well, depression is, they finally have said it is a disease, it's an illness, but it's a treatable illness.
Thank God it is.
You are surviving proof that you can recover from that. What happened? How did you?
Well, chemically, they tried a lot of things with me. And matter of fact, the first time they tried something called Nardil, and Nardil worked for me, but Nardil made me so manic, I went out and I started spending money like crazy. And I went into the antique business. I don't know why, but I did.
Which is really isn't good if you're not going to be working.
Well, at that time I was working, and I was capable of working because of this pill. And what happened was I started buying Wooten desk. I'd go all over the country buying Wooten desk, and where I'd call people and I'd say I want a Wooten desk, and they'd say, okay, we got one. I'd pay $12,000, $15,000, and then little by little I was spending too much money. Not little by little, but a lot by lot. Mm-hmm. One day I was in Toronto. I was doing a Jack Jones show, and I called at 7 o'clock in the morning, and I called the guy, an antique dealer, and I says, have you got any Wooten desk? He says, I got a 2 Wooten desk. I said, you do? I said, how much are they? He says, one is a $1,200, the other is a $1,500. Well, I got in a cab in Toronto, and I started traveling. About $46 later, I got in front of this antique place. And I went in, and I said to the guy, you got the 2 Wooten desk, I'm the guy that called you. He said, here's a Wooten desk, and he knocked on the desk.
Oh,
and this is a Wooten desk, and he knocked on the desk. But I got crazy. I bought a George Washington desk before the paint was dry. Guy says, this will be an antique in about Tuesday. Let the paint dry. But I really got my sugar with this thing. I spent maybe about $4 million cash with antiques. And I found out later, because after I got to know the antique business, I didn't buy one thing that was saleable again.
You didn't buy one thing that was more than 20 years old.
Unbelievable.
Well, after you began the therapy and the medical intervention, when did you decide it was time to get back to show business? I mean, you've been away from it for 6 years. What did you miss something about it?
No.
You didn't?
No, not the condition I was in, no. I really, I was never that enamored with show business anyway. I don't think my ego really needed that thing. I got in it. It was a way of making a living and everything else. But I never was driven like so many people are driven by this business. But
and it came easy to you.
Too easy.
Too
maybe
easy?
maybe too easy. And because I never really worked at my business. But if I tell you what got me back, and the road to coming back to show business was golf.
Golf.
My wife made me play golf.
Wait a minute, because I've known you, what, 15 years? You hate golf.
I hated it. Absolutely right. I hated it. And my wife kept on saying, you got to get out of bed. You can't do this. You know, we had a place up at Lake Arrowhead, and I'd go up there. Everybody else was having a good time on my boat and everything. I was laying in bed. So she said, you got to play golf. We joined the country club and everything. I said, I hate it. I don't want to play golf. She said, you're going to play golf. Well, I started playing golf again. I became so obsessed with this game, but I not only became obsessed, I became really addicted to the point that I studied videos every night, 2 hours. I read every magazine. I read every book by Ben Hogan, by Arnold Palmer, by this one. And I got to like it. It's the first time in my life that I ever put all my thinking and my strength and my mental ability into something. In show business, I never did that. I never took my singing lessons when I should have. I never took dancing lessons. I just didn't do this.
And yet you were successful. You
yeah,
were very
in
successful.
spite of that. But yet there was something that I hated myself for, and there was a self-hate because I really didn't put it back into the business. I watched other people going to, to singing lessons and stuff like that. But this thing gave me a confidence as I started to get better with the golf, because I started out at a 26 handicap, and then I went down to a 20 handicap, then I went down to an 18 handicap, then I went down to a 12 handicap. And as I got better with this game and I got to know more about the game, all of a sudden I said to myself, why can't I apply myself that way in show business? And maybe if I get back into it. And by this time I wasn't suffering from these panic attacks anymore, which are the worst things in the world.
So the golf was kind of like self-analysis for you. It made you think.
It was a therapy, yeah. It was a form of therapy with psychiatry. I must admit that if it wasn't for my psychiatrist, because I finally found the right guy. I was with 3 or 4 that were not the right guy. One guy I was with was a guy by the name of Hacker in California that just stuffed his pipe for an hour. And I want to tell you, I have a clinic in Vienna on Svea. I says, what do? You learn how to do this? You know, which is short of something else. I don't know what it was.
Right.
But this man that has been really wonderful for me. And he brought out, and something I'm going to say that's my relationships with my family. As close as I was with my family, little by little things were happening with my family. My mother passed away, then my father passed away. And little by little, there was like, all of a sudden I became free. I didn't have this tremendous responsibility that I felt with a Jewish guilt. You gotta do this, you gotta do that, you gotta,
Yeah.
Your mama, I'm still 60-some years old, your mama wouldn't like that, your father wouldn't like this,
Well, isn't there somewhere I read that, and we'll ask the audience to forgive us for a second, because this is opening night, so they're rehearsing and doing sound check, so you'll excuse the audio interruption.
Yeah, and if my pill don't work, it won't be opening night.
Really? Somewhere I read that a man doesn't really become a man on his own until he loses his parents. Or a Jewish man doesn't.
Well, well, in my case, yes, I will agree with that. I mean, I love my parents tremendously, but it also was a thing that I was too close to my family. I got out of service when I was about 20 years old, and there was a man that I was aboard ship with called Dale Stitzel. I was aboard an aircraft carrier called the Bonner Richard. And Dale was about 43 years old when he was in the service, and he went in because his son was in the Navy. And I became very close to him. And it was like a father image for me. And anyway, when we got out of service, he came to visit my family, and he says to me, he was from Columbus, Ohio, and he says to me, Shecky, he says, I love you very much. He says, you've got to get away from this family. You've got to stand on your own. He says, I know you love your family and everything else. Well, coming from the kind of background that I came from, I couldn't accept that,
You came from, originally born in Chicago.
Born in Chicago.
And I think you got your start in comedy working as a social director
at a resort
in Wisconsin, which is kind of like the Midwest equivalent to the Borscht Belt.
Yeah, but we didn't have mountains. We had little tiny hills.
Little hills.
Yeah. But we tried to copy what they did in the Catskills.
Were your parents supportive of that?
My mother was, yes. Well, I sang when I was a little kid. I sang very well, and they used to bring me to shows and stuff. And but then when I went on the road, even doing summer stock, I didn't want that. I knew that was not for me. Even till this day, when they asked me to do a show, legitimate show, I just can't think about doing it. I don't enjoy that.
Really?
No.
Too structured?
I think that I just got to get up there and it's got to be Shecky Greene. I got to be the writer, the director, the producer.
Shecky, a lot of people have said a lot of things about you, some of them nice, some of them not so nice. But the one thing that seems to be a constant over the years is that people refer to you as the quintessential saloon comic. How does it make you feel?
I really don't know what that means, but I think it's a wonderful title, and it's been nice all these years. I think Danny Thomas was that. Danny Thomas was a comedian, he was an actor, he was a singer, you know. Mm-hmm. And coming from Chicago, I used to go see Danny when I was a kid, a lot, and we got very friendly. And a lot of things that I did were structured after Danny Thomas's material. Danny Thomas used to stand under, he had to command the audience. This was before Alan King, because later on Alan King took on these things with a vest.
But you did too.
Yes.
You were very authoritative. Yeah. On stage, even though it might appear that you're a loose cannon off all over the place, you are very structured in your act.
Well, Danny used to. The thing that I loved about Danny used to get the people hilariously laughing, and then he would get dramatic, and he would take them all the way down again with something dramatic, and then all of a sudden one line would throw them right back in, and that's what I do. I'd like to do. It's not exactly playing with the audience, right, but it's the ability of acting, and you get a satisfaction out of doing it instead of just at one level, you know. Right. But there's many people that I've admired in this, and the kids today the Dana Garveys, the Mike Myers, the Robert Williams. I love these kids.
All people who do voices, and you're doing voices.
Yeah, exactly. Isn't it amazing? I didn't realize that.
They're character actors.
Yeah.
And is that the way you see yourself, more a character actor than a comic or a comedian?
I think so. I think that Sid Caesar also is. I think that Sid Caesar is not Sid Caesar until it becomes into a character, you know. But that's what I always fashion myself as.
This is not really a song, it's a story. It's a story of a man from Dallas, Texas, and then boom, 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 punchline, and then we go, so give your heart and soul to me, and life will always be lovely on rose. Huh? Good. This is Stevie Michaels. Get him on the camera, please. Without him, I'm nothing. Without you, I'm no one. Without you, I'm nothing. Without you, I can't hear the music. Without you, I don't know where to go. Without you.
All right, to try and condense everything into a capsule summary, you did you can't call it the Borscht Belts, but the Bible Belt in Wisconsin. The social director went to New Orleans for what, a 2-week gig, and stayed 3 years?
Stayed 3 years.
Stayed 3 years, and used that as a springboard to Las Vegas in the early 50s, where you ruled the lounges out there.
Well, actually, I didn't go into the lounges first, David. I was in the main room.
Really? You worked your way down?
Yeah. Well, I put myself in the lounge because I had signed a joint contract between the Frontier Hotel and the Riviera.
Right.
And they didn't have room for me. And I was gambling pretty heavy at that time, and I was married, and I said, well, let me go into the lounge. Because the lounge was like a lot of the places that I'd worked before, you know, kind of clubs. And they said, okay, we'll take a chance. And I put comedy into the lounge.
Which had never really been done before.
And it hit for me. It was wonderful. And, you know, it gave me the freedom. That was Shecky Greene, the freedom. Right. It wasn't going into a main room where guys says, you got to do an hour. You know, got to get off in an hour. Because they were very concerned about that in the gambling places.
Especially in the main rooms.
Yeah.
The lounges, you had more flexibility.
The lounge, you got to do anything I wanted to do. And they didn't realize the lounges were going to get that big with the type of people coming to see us, you know. The lounge was just an extra thing for the people.
When I opened the show, I talked about you being a survivor. Because in addition to the depression that you've successfully conquered, there were some medical problems. 15 years ago, you had cancer.
Cancer.
You had a notorious reputation for drinking.
Before that, I had a prosthesis.
And before that, I was going to say you
prosthesis, hip replacement.
You're the bionic man.
Yeah.
But you've managed to overcome a lot of those obstacles.
Well, I'm working for a brain transplant now, but I think the drinking, you know, the drinking actually was a part of my depression. I mean, I can understand it now.
But you said yourself you were not a nice drunk.
Oh, no. Matter of fact, I was arrested so many times in Vegas. If there was no cop around, I put myself under citizen's arrest. I had some wonderful experiences with that. Things that I like to, you know, I had total blackouts, and yet I do remember some things, and the things that I remember are frightening, really frightening, because that's really not me.
Scary.
It's not me, God.
Because this reminds me of a scene in that movie, Examining Your Life. Is that the?
Yeah.
the name of it. All right.
But you know, it has been now 19 years since I've had a drink. I want
Has it been
people to
that
know,
long?
yes. And how I stopped, it's amazing how one thing works for the other. This drug that I was taking, Nardil, which was making me so manic. If I would have had a drink when I was taking Nardil, I would have died, because you can't drink with it all. Certain foods you can't have, and alcohol you can't have. So I gave up drinking, not from AA or anything else, because I couldn't have it with this. And I have
wanna
never
kill
gone.
yourself.
I have never gone back to a drink again.
Do you miss it?
No, not at all.
Well, at least when
I
you wake
wasn't
up in
the
the morning, you know where you are.
Yeah, but I wasn't the kind of drinker that enjoyed anything, even a social drink with somebody, you know? I just said enjoy it.
All right, well, we'll expunge the arrest record in Las Vegas then, and we'll cut to the chase. When or what made you decide that it was time to get back into the business? I mean, did you feel this burning need to get back on stage? I mean,
No, Dave.
no.
Nope. People kept on saying to me, you know, you go back to work and, you know, you can do it, but I couldn't do it. And I know I couldn't do it. And I said, if it ever comes, and it may not have ever come, I says, if it ever comes, there's some music in the background, I will know. I think I will. I think that God will give me the ability. I sound like Jimmy Swaggart or one of those guys, but God will give me the ability to know if I could do it, I couldn't do it. Well, I knew I couldn't do it. And it so happens that I had a doctor, David, that kept telling me, you're not going to go back to do it. You cannot do it, and you're not going to do it. But somewhere in the back of his mind, he thought maybe it will come a day that he would say to me, you can't do it now. Even till this day, we discuss things, my doctor and I, and he says to me, golf is the most important thing in your life. This is secondary. This is something you're going to do to enjoy. And if you enjoy it, you will continue to do it. If you don't enjoy it, then you know you got to give it up.
Well, you were a workaholic, though. I mean, when you were in your prime, you never took more than a week at a time off. You used to be afraid you're going to miss something.
Well, no, it wasn't so much, you know, I had Vegas like 20 weeks a year and then things. But what did happen was when that wasn't there anymore, and I did have those spaces in between, I think the depression came even more, you know, because I had too much time to think about it. But now, how I got back is that Howie Rapp, who books the Catskills and everything, and other places, including Atlantic City, and I stayed in contact, and I said, Howie, I would just like to try and to see if I can get in front of an audience. And I went up to the Catskills. I went to Kutcher's, a place that I love and I felt very comfortable with.
Unannounced, unadvertised.
Unannounced, unadvertised. Yeah. Went in, and the people were, I was a little frightened at the beginning, and I explained to them, you know, and I tell the people up close, I says, I'm here through the courtesy of Prozac. And
it worked.
And it worked. And it was, and then I did another job. I even did a little movie called The Organ Grinder Man. Where's my monkey? I did a movie called Pizza Girls. And this is a very strange story because the guy says to me, it's one day shooting. Well, they sent me a script and I said to the guy, I've done movies before. This is 3 weeks worth of work. He says to me, Shecky, we'll do it in one day. Well, I went down at 8 o'clock that morning, started to shoot. We didn't finish till 2 o'clock the next morning. And my wife had to throw me in the car and I says, never. I don't want show business. I don't want this. I don't want movies again. But it showed that I could do it, you know.
Well, that's because that takes discipline.
Yeah.
To sit there all day, all night.
All day.
To say, stop. And
I started out with a German accent in this thing. For the first 6 hours, I was with a German accent, and then about the next couple hours, I started to switch to a Viennese accent, and then by the time I finished, I was doing a Swedish accent. Don't worry about anything, I didn't know who the hell I was. And the director kept on saying, it's a print, it's wonderful, it's a print. The kind of money they got me.
And he ran down to the drugstore and they had the film
printed, yeah.
So that's it for movies, right? I mean, because you've done your share of movies.
I think if the right thing comes and it's not too difficult, I will do it.
Mel Brooks.
No, Mel Brooks, no, that's too difficult.
Is it really?
Yeah, you know something, I really don't Mel that well, but I didn't enjoy doing it. I think I was in a bad state when I did that picture. And
we're talking about History of the World, Part 1.
I really didn't enjoy doing that movie. And then when I think about it, I gave up, forgive me for being braggadocious, but I will say $600,000 worth of work that I had already to go do a $40,000 movie. And when I think about it and I see the movie, I just sit there going, no, you can't. But I mean, it was unbelievable. Even one of my agents says to me, he says, an English guy, Peter, I forget his last name,
He says, you know, you can't do this. You're giving up a lot of work. He says, for this ridiculous, silly-ass picture, and it's not going to do anything.
and I don't know whether it ever did anything.
Well, I mean, I enjoy it. I think it made its money on home video.
Yeah.
It didn't do it in the theaters. All right, so you're happy now just doing the occasional club date. You're not going to book yourself crazy.
No, you know, we went into Vegas. We did 2 days. And
Right.
Buddy Hackett said to me, he did this when Buddy Hackett went back to work.
Buddy says, you know, I'm only going for Sundays. I'm only going to do Sunday.
And he did Sunday, and he was very successful, so they gave him Sunday and Monday. And then finally Buddy went out, now he's doing a week in Vegas. So Buddy says to me, that's the way you should get back at Buddy. I says, I cannot do it. He's the only one I could really talk to, face and
Right.
talk. And finally I says, okay. So I went to Vegas, and I talked to Burton Cohn, who's running the Desert Inn, Sheraton Desert Inn. And they want me to say Sheraton Desert Inn.
Right. They just closed the deal.
Yeah. And I said, Bert, give me Mondays. You got Mondays open. He says, all right. So he called me and said, Shecky, it's going to cost us too much money to just give you Mondays and put up billboards and everything. Take Monday and Tuesday. I says, fine. Well, we went in Monday and Tuesday, and you couldn't get into the room. Of course, that's my home, you know.
Right.
But I mean, it was just unbelievable. And I felt comfortable. So I says to him, okay, you'll let me know the next Monday and Tuesday. Well, he called this week and says, we want you for a week. And I really didn't want to get back into that too
Right.
soon. You know, this is perfect for me to do it. Yeah,
3
Friday and Saturday.
shows, you know, in and out.
And I said, I don't think I can handle it. But you want to know something? I worked up to the mountains again, and I did some other jobs, and I think I can handle it.
When you went up to Kutcher's and you did that first show, it's been a couple months now. What did that first laugh feel like to you? Was it a relief? I mean, was
Oh,
it like-
yeah, well, it definitely was a relief. But I'm going to tell you something. I was so numb at the beginning. I guess, I think I had the first laugh and didn't hear it. Then I got the second laugh, and I don't think I heard it. But I heard the third and fourth and fifth. And I'll tell you, matter of fact, that's all I got was 5 that night. But
But if you only told 4 jokes, then you're ahead of the
you
game.
know, I really don't. I'm not like other comedians and worrying about whether the laugh is going to be, because I know eventually with something that I'm going to do, we'll get to the audience.
You're going to get him.
So I'm not. I want to tell you, I was in North Carolina this morning, and I tell you, a funny thing happened. I don't do that type of stuff, you know.
Henny Youngman.
Although that sounded pretty good, I may do
That was a
that.
good Henny.
Henny Youngman called me. I had my hip replaced,
Right.
and his wife had just died. And Henny Youngman evidently rehearsed what he was going to say to me in the hospital. He called me up and he says, Shecky, he says, how's your hip? Sadie died. I says, Henny, you mean Sadie died? He says, Shecky, how's your hip? Sadie died. He reprepeated the same way,
he's
like
reading
it was
the
doing a
script.
routine. Yeah.
Look, I know you got to rehearse because you got to get it right. So you
Well,
gotta
it
get the
wasn't this a
rehearsal.
rehearsal? Why don't we do the real
this
one
is
of
just
this?
this is just a warm up. You're going to go up there and rehearse. We're going to follow you with the camera. Shecky,
Davey,
thanks so
thanks.
much. Welcome back.
I thank you.
And stay back this time.
And I
will
say
you?
hello to everybody here in this whole area.